Good evening. Around 750 private patients who were operated on by disgraced breast surgeon Ian Patterson are to receive a share of a £37 million fund.
They've so far not received any compensation, despite finding out their operations were unnecessary almost 5 years ago. Patterson was jailed in May for deliberately wounding some of his patients. Our health correspondent Stacey Foster is outside the Spire Parkway in Solihull for us tonight. And Stacey, why the settlement for patients now?
Well, there was due to be a landmark court case on this in October of this year to decide who should compensate the private patients for those unnecessary operations that Ian Patterson performed here over a 14-year period and at a hospital, Spire Hospital in Little Aston as well. This settlement today puts an end to 5 years of fighting for patients. His botched surgery has cost the NHS £18 million in costs and compensation. But the patients who saw Ian Patterson privately and paid for the privilege haven't received a penny. They were taking the hospital where they had their surgery to court, along with the NHS who employed Patterson and his own personal insurers. Their claim was that all three were responsible for allowing Ian Patterson to carry out operations on them that they didn't need. Spire, because it happened in their hospitals. The NHS, because it didn't tell the private sector Patterson was under investigation. Spire said that Ian Patterson wasn't an employee of this hospital where he'd been working since 1998, and therefore the hospital isn't responsible for any of his crimes. That said, as a result of their own investigation in 2014, they found that he was carrying out operations here that he hadn't been doing for a long time on the NHS, and worse still, when he was suspended from the NHS, he was still operating here. Spire Healthcare has announced today it wants to settle out of court, putting an end to 5 years of uncertainty for more than 750 patients.
To have lost things that I have because of him, it's been awful. So hopefully now can start to rebuild.
Frances Perks had to sell her home to pay to live after Ian Patterson removed her left breast, saying she was at too high a risk of cancer. She wasn't. But the distress of finding out that she'd had a number of unnecessary procedures left her unable to work.
I'm never going to forget what has happened to me. I'm reminded of that every day. You know, the scars are there when you look at yourself in the mirror. But at least he's got a prison sentence. He's going to be away for a long time. And at last, the financial settlement. So it's a huge pressure taken off and start my life.
Of the £37 million fund, £27.2 million is being put in by Spire Healthcare. The rest is coming from the NHS and Patterson's private insurers. Then costs of the solicitors will have to be deducted and what's left will be shared among the patients. But this offer still has to be approved by the courts. That will happen on the 31st of October.
Well, Stacey, what are Spire Healthcare saying tonight?
Well, we were hoping that someone from Spire would be able to speak to us in person today. We haven't heard from them even through the criminal trial. We've not had a real person to speak to. But in a statement that was released today from the interim chief executive officer, Simon Gordon told us, whilst nothing diminishes Mr Patterson's responsibility for his actions, these events took place in our hospitals and this should not have happened. We accept that better clinical governance in the private hospitals where Mr Patterson practised, as well as in his NHS trust, might have led to action being taken sooner, and it is right that we have made a material contribution to the settlement announced today. But £27 million, let's put that into context. Spire is a very profitable company, and this year alone has opened 2 brand new hospitals, each costing £65 million to build. And in their press statement today, that was, well, addressed as much to shareholders as it was to former patients of Ian Patterson, saying that this money would come from cash reserves, but it was hoped that maybe insurers would pay out. But today is an important marker for anyone treated by Ian Patterson. Already 256 cases have been settled in the NHS. Today, we're told 750 private cases will now receive compensation. So in the region of 1,000 people that were treated by this man now getting some money, but no amount, they say, will ever be enough. But it may help them to rebuild and move on.
OK, Stacey, for now, thank you.
And joining us now is Kashmir Uppal, who's the solicitor for a number of Ian Patterson's victims. Welcome to the programme. We're hearing obviously about the compensation now for 750 of Ian Patterson's victims, those patients that he treated. Put it into context for us. Is it enough as an amount?
I think nothing will ever be enough. What these patients have been through is horrendous. There is an element of compromise to the settlement. But what we have to recognise is the potential defendants may not have made any settlement proposals, and there was the possibility of no settlement whatsoever. So in that respect, we are pleased that there is a settlement. Obviously disappointed that it's not going to be a full settlement in respect of all of the patients, and disappointed that it's taken this long to get to this stage. This has been going on since 2012, and Spire only seem to have taken responsibility for it following the criminal conviction.
Is there a sense among the patients that you've spoken to regarding the settlement that you know, they want to get on with their lives, they want to draw a line under what's happened and try and move on where they can?
Very much so. Once he was convicted and his sentence was increased to 20 years, he's been struck off by the GMC. He is no longer a threat to patients, and these women have had this hanging over them for such a long period of time and facing financial hardship. So they do need that compensation. They need to move forward and get on with their lives.
What a lot of the patients will probably be worried about is the regulation of private healthcare. Is there going to be a change to that? Because obviously that is exactly what led to the situation we're in today. Well,
we are calling for a public inquiry to look at as to why this happened and to make sure that new legislation is introduced to prevent this ever happening again. Spire's recognition is accepting responsibility, accepting that if a private doctor is given practicing privileges in a private hospital and things go wrong and they fail to deal with that, that the private healthcare company can't get away with that. They will be held responsible, and therefore in that respect it's a good step forward in better patient protection and patient safety in the private healthcare sector.
OK. We'll leave it there. Kashmir Uppal, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And there will be more on today's compensation settlement for Ian Patterson's patients on the ITV National News, which of course follows us.